we've had a 40-year bull market. I think the fun times are over in the bonds. So just a lot of Wall Street propaganda that affects the way we think. And we have to start being critical. And I have a feeling this is where we're going with this conversation. We have to start using our brains to have some critical thinking on what's going on, because what we're being told most of the time, it feels like now, just ain't right.
Hey, great day, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of the Jim Gale Show. We're extremely excited to have you here. As always, you have myself, Matthew, Britt, and our host, Mr. Jim Gale. How you doing today, Jim?
I'm doing fantastic, buddy. I'm so excited for our guest today. We are going to learn some stuff today.
Absolutely. And thank you so much to our guest, Mr. Mark Yegge, for joining us. How are you doing today, Mark?
I'm awesome. Great to be here, guys. Can't wait to get into whatever we're going to get into. I love leaving the question mark part of it open. So let's see what happens.
Yeah, it's great to have you here. Thank you so much for making time to join us. Mark, you have on your website, you're a wealth architect, fund manager, author, and mentor. What an incredible group.
I do a couple of things. It's kind of the jack of all trades kind of deal, but I have a lot of interest in life, and I like to share those with other people as well. So it's kind of cool.
The things in life that bring you the most joy.
If you studied any Tony Robbins, you know, he has the 6 human needs, right? And most people are driven by either significance or certainty, right? I'm not driven by either one of those very much. I'm driven, although I'm on a podcast here, I guess there's some significance to that, but I'm driven a little bit more by uncertainty, the variety that life brings, right? Because life can be, you know, if life is predictable and certain, it can be kind of boring. I like the excitement about something around the corner that I haven't seen before. It's a challenge. That leads into my other significant, my other need, and that is growth. So it's those two things that constantly drive me. So I don't watch a lot of TV. I write a lot of books, or I read a lot of books too. I create courses, and I try to mentor people and help them, you know, transform into living the life of what they want to live, right? Because most people don't really focus on that, and I like to help people focus on that. And it's mostly in the money realm, but I also love to learn a lot of cool things.
Oh, that's awesome. And that's one of the passions we share with the food forestry and the becoming self-reliant.
Yeah.
Self-reliance starts in the heart and in the mind, right?
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And, you know, in fact, Jim, most things start in the mind, right? And, you know, even like I'll be switching over to financial stuff today, but, you know, stock trading and being an investor in the market is 90% mindset, right? Most people, they're always like, you know, if they don't know me, they're like, okay, what stock do I buy? Should I buy Tesla? Should I buy Apple? What about that Amazon? Like it just split 20 for 1. And I'm like, listen, guys, it's not the stock. It's not the stock, because we all have the opportunity to buy Amazon today. We just don't know if it's going to go up or down. We all can click this mouse, and it takes 2 seconds to spend $250,000 and buy a stock. The issue starts with your brain right after you click the mouse, right? So the stock is important. I'm not downplaying it, but you can take almost any stock, and if you have the right strategy, a proven strategy that's been back tested and things like that, if you have the right strategy, it's what you do after you click that mouse that makes you the money, right? It all starts with the mindset. And the mindset is create some rules around what you do. If you create rules around what you do, then you take the emotions out of the investing. So I always say this: emotions are the enemy of the investor. In fact, I say it like this: when emotions goes up, intelligence goes down, and vice versa, right? And I don't know a lot of people that make really great emotionally charged decisions. Usually you have to be pretty logical. You think about a decision, but when the market is open or you don't have rules and you're making decisions and you're making them out of fear, you're probably making the wrong decision, at least in the stock market from what I've seen. So you got to get your mind right. Number one.
How did you get your mind right?
Well, I lost a lot of money in the market. Let's start with that. So I've been doing this since I was 12 years old, and I hit a couple little home runs. You know, I turned $300 into $600 when I was like 13. I turned 1,000 into 2,000 when I was like 14. I bought my first car. So I was kind of hooked on the stock market before I was 16 years old. One day I woke up and I lost $170,000 in a week or something like that. It's not just something crazy. And I was like, okay, wait a minute. That's not the first time that's happened to me. But let's see if we can make it the last time. And so I started to say, okay, what are all the people doing right I mean, I've been doing this for a long time, but I still am making stupid mistakes. What are the people that are doing it right? What are they doing? And so I started to study and learn and watch seminars and go to events and get into what the greats are doing, because you can learn a lot by modeling other people that have already done it before you. And I started studying people like Jesse Livermore, probably the greatest trader of all time, made and lost today's equivalent of $1 billion 5 times in his life, made and lost. So he knows both sides, right? And then William O'Neill, who's probably the second greatest trader of all time. And in the 50s and 60s, he made huge amounts of money and started this paper called Investor's Business Daily, which is like second to the Wall Street Journal. And I started to read those guys, a guy named Nicholas Darvas, who wrote a book called How I Made $2 Million in the Stock Market. And he did it all from Europe, by sending telexes to his broker. And like he was teaching dancing lessons in the day, and the broker would text him like what IBM stock was trading. And he said, he would text him or telex him. It was their equivalent of texting. He would telex him back the next day, buy this stock. So he wasn't even involved in the day-to-day. They didn't have trading systems in mice that you could click, right? So I started to study all these guys, and I realized that there were commonalities, right? They would set their limits to sell pretty early so they wouldn't be caught in that downdraft like I just described, where it went from 80 to 70 to 60 to 50, right? They got out early. Why ride it all the way down, right? Find the ones that are going up, number one. Number two, they had strategies for where they would buy, and they studied past winners. I call them super stocks, right? They study those, the super stocks that I'm talking about. And today's super stocks are Amazon, Apple, Google, Facebook, Tesla. And the ones of yesteryear were GE and GM and Ford and Chrysler and even Walmart later than that, and Starbucks in the 80s and 90s. And so these companies, if you start studying them, our brains are wired for pattern recognition. So I started to see, and these guys have started, I didn't do all the research, they did a bunch of it for me, but they started to see patterns. And there are certain patterns that appear on charts. So you start with a good company. So no question, you need a good stock, but then you find a pattern that appears on a chart. And so once you start to figure out those patterns, there's rules. And so you set rules. And so now I have a system called the cash flow machine, which now is a rule-based system. We've got like 60 rules in the system. Now, it sounds like a lot, but you kind of get the rules after a while. There's just a few rules, and you have like this little decision tree. Like, is the stock going up? Is the market going up? Do this. That will prevent you from making emotional decisions. So that's where it was for me. Is it started with a lot of emotional decisions, led to a lot of pain. Pain for me is not a failure. Pain for me is a leverage point to learn. And then now creating a system around a cash flow machine with lots and lots of rules to take the brain out of it and the emotions out of it, and use the rule-based system for getting proven results.
Yeah. So it's modeling. It's a series of modeling different successes that you've seen and different learnings, and you put them into a strategy, it sounds like.
Exactly. And Edward Thorpe, he's a 92-year-old guy. If you Google the guy, you'd think he's 62 if you ever talk to him. He's got some great interviews out there. I love the guy. He's my idol. I actually need to call him and talk to him about being my idol, because he's just he transformed a lot of the way I think about risk and about my life, right? He wrote a book called Beat the Market. The book that he wrote before that, it was called Beat the Dealer. So wow. He's the guy, you've seen a movie about him, probably. Yeah. He's the guy that took his little team of MIT students to Las Vegas and figured out how to beat blackjack.
That was a great movie.
Great movie. And that's the system that today card counters around the world still employ. He got kicked out of Las Vegas, right? But he created that mathematically based system of card counting, and he was beating every casino he walked in. And he realized, you don't need to kill the casino. You don't need to bet it all on, on your 210s in the hole, right? You basically just take little wins, because that's all the casino does. They have a little edge. You flip that edge slightly to you, and now you can win. Yeah. And now when he wrote the Beat the Market book, he did the same thing. So he's got a very little bit amount of money risked, but he can make a huge payday. And that's what most investors are striving for. They're striving for hitting that home run. They swing so hard to hit that home run, they strike out a lot. Yeah. But if you follow baseball, you know that the guys in the Hall of Fame, those guys have good batting averages. Yeah. All the batting average is that you get on base. You don't have to swing for the fence. You don't have to hit a home run. You just got to get on first base. And they're taking a little risk for sure, but the risk the risky guy ends up losing all of it because he's swinging for the fences. So we do this in the stock market. We basically rent out our stocks. Most people don't realize you can do that. We can do that in the stock market. And we don't get the home run, but we make 2 to 4% a month in safe, reliable income. It doesn't always work, but when you can get the probabilities in your favor, then the system works. Last statistic, and we'll move on if you want. 80% of the time, the people buying the options lose their money 80% of the time, because 80% of options expire worthless. That means the person on the other side of the trade is making money 80% of the time. So it's just a probabilities-based system. Remember, when you buy a stock, you've got a 50% chance of being right and a 50% chance of being wrong. If you can inch that up towards 80%, and you can just do that over again, that's not a 2% edge. That's a big edge. And that's the key, is you get the probabilities in your favor and you just keep doing it over and over again.
All right. So I can't help but going deep on some. Matthew, do you have any thoughts on that before I go into the deep question here?
Well, one thing that popped in my mind is about the Baseball Hall of Famers and the batting averages that these people hold. And remember, none of them are batting 100 or 1,000%, right?
Well, that's right.
Your absolute bests are maybe getting the 400s. And on average, your Hall of Famers are in the 300 range. So reality is 7 out of 10 times those people are striking out or getting out, fly ball or whatever it is.
Yeah.
So just applying that to life, making sure that you are taking those chances, you are swinging your figurative life bat and getting out there and trying stuff and realizing that if you fall, you better get the fuck back up and keep going, because life is made for winning, and winning comes from failure and trying and continuing to move forward. So what you said there, Mark, really stands out to me. And I want all of our listeners to take that piece to heart and just realize that no matter where you are right now, I know a lot of people are struggling. A lot of people are in the place of where they think things are failing for them. Things are getting challenging right now, right? The squeeze is on. So now is the time to dust off your pants, pick yourself up by those bootstraps, get back out on the field, take another swing.
I love it. And I'll now you got me going, because now I want to open up about the conventional wisdom. You have to have this buy and hold mentality. Why? Because the Wall Street doesn't want you to take your money away. Number one. Number two, you can outperform the markets if you just buy and hold a stock, because over time the market goes up 9%. Over the last 100 years, it's gone up 9%. But they also tell you to diversify. Okay, I call it diversifying, right? So in investments, they tell you to diversify. So the thing for the last 15 or 20 years has been this 60-40 portfolio, that you should be in 60% stocks and 40% bonds. Bonds are considered on Wall Street, if you don't know, the safe money, right? Why? Because they pay interest. Now, bonds for over the 10-year bond in the U.S. Treasury has paid about 2% over the last 10 years on average, right? And that's great, but it didn't keep up with inflation. Let's start with that. So that doesn't sound very safe to me. And number two, in the first 6 months of this year, the bond market lost 30%. So if you made 2% a year over the last 10 years, you made 20%. Awesome. You didn't keep up with inflation, and you had to pay taxes on the 2%. Let's not even forget about that. But you ended up losing 30% of your principal. Like, that doesn't sound safe to me at all.
No.
And so Wall Street will tell you, well, you got to have a diversified portfolio. And that way, when stocks go down, you can see my voice, I'm making fun of them. I used to be one of these guys, right? When stocks go down, at least your bond portfolio holds everything together. No. When people were losing 70, 80% on Netflix this year, bond market was down 30%. Okay, it was down a little less, but the bond market doesn't recover as quickly. In fact, we've had a 40-year bull market. I think the fun times are over in the bonds. So just a lot of Wall Street propaganda that affects the way we think. And we have to start being critical. And I have a feeling this is where we're going with this conversation. We have to start using our brains to have some critical thinking on what's going on, because what we're being told most of the time, it feels like now, just ain't right.
Yeah.
Right? I don't know about what you guys think about this jab thing, but I certainly am seeing a lot of presidents getting it after they've been double masked and double jabbed and told that we were all told that we weren't going to get it if we just succumb to this untested thing.
Yeah, COVID is politically convenient for these presidents. That way they don't have to go to a particular meeting.
Maybe,
so let's get into this. This is where my mind gets blown. So we talked about the margin. You talked about taking that 5% or 10% out or 2%. If you can get 2% over time and you can start increasing the money that you're playing with, 2% could be $2 million a day. It's just a function of what is your base fund. And so you've got an entity. You know what Aladdin is? Do you know about the computer named Aladdin?
I don't.
Okay. Well, BlackRock, you've heard of BlackRock,
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
Okay, BlackRock owns the world. BlackRock and Vanguard, they literally control pretty much everything in our world. Every industry, they control politics, they control all of it. And they've got a computer that has been running all of the financial bets for BlackRock for many years, for well over a decade. The computer is called Aladdin.
Okay.
All right. Now, guess how much money the computer did? I believe it was 2020 or 2021. All right, let's call it 2021. But it was of the last 2 years. Guess how much money, US dollars, that computer traded?
How much it traded or how much it made?
How much it traded?
I don't know.
How many assets that it controlled in that year? Not like one trade is $100 and then you use that same $100 and trade again. But guess how much money went through that computer?
No idea.
$21 trillion.
Wow.
BlackRock's entity itself controls, I think it's 14 trillion, but they've got all these other major entities coming in that are saying, here, take my money too. Take my money too. So now you've got a top-down entity that's run by a computer that is sucking like a parasite the productivity of humanity out with every single bet, because the computer's job is to analyze the trends that you're talking about. Right? And when this computer analyzes the trends and they can bet $1 billion in an instant, where most conventional traders cannot. Right? In fact, I don't know if any can. And they can literally do it instantly. So they calculate a trend, they bet the trend, they take their margin. If they take 0.001% of everything, but they're using $21 trillion to do so, right? Or even $1 trillion or $1 billion, all of a sudden over time, that adds up. And what is that? The result of that? Not all, a lot of our money, $21 trillion worth, is now in the hands of a few people who control that computer. And now the theory is, and this theory gets really deep, and you can go online and check this out, but now computers for the last 6-7 years have claimed to be self-aware. They have claimed to be sentient. I don't believe that. I don't believe a computer can all of a sudden have a spirit, have a soul, but that's their claim. And so now you've got computers which are interconnected, now controlling the world's currency. And what is the currency? The currency is the energy of the people. It's like the current of a river, and it's held in the riverbanks. And now you've got the currency of people being sucked and all going into the hands of a very few. What do you think of that?
Well, I got a lot to think about on that. That's, first of all, that's interesting. Thanks for the Aladdin story. There's two sides to it, and that they're risking a lot of money, and they're probably creating some systemic risk, because when these companies fail, and you've seen them, specifically, I trade, I'm an investor, and I have a hedge fund in Bitcoin, right? Yeah. And so in cryptocurrency, and in the last 6 months, a lot of cryptocurrencies have failed, right? And crypto coin, there's Bitcoin, and then there's shitcoin, right? And so some of these other coins are not decentralized. They're run by a person or a group of people. And aren't we trying to get away from having a person or a group of people control the money? Yeah. And when AI starts to do that, then I think we got a problem. But Bitcoin is different than that. Bitcoin is different from the cryptocurrencies. It's the only really truly decentralized that isn't run by a human. It's run by an algorithm that's been around for 13 years and it's never been breached. So I think, because I believe that money is the energy running in that current that you say, I believe that energy is, we've got all kinds of diversions and problem with the money. It's going on. It's flooding everything, right? So we've got too much money chasing too few goods. That's causing inflation. We've got irresponsible people buying votes, right, with their money, by getting coerced by the political action committees and by the special interest groups. And that money is being debased. And so if we don't know that, so listeners, guys, listen, if your money is being debased and it's called inflation, you are losing your money. Like here we have the official rate of inflation is 9.1%. Well, that's the official rate. It's a lie. The real rate, I can tell you, my drinks, have gone from $10 for a martini to $22. My steaks have gone from $32 for a fillet to $65. They're not up 9%. No. But even if you just believe the government that we're only up 9%, in Canada, it's even worse, I think. But if you're talking about inflation at 9%, that's a month's salary. Yes. Like we're not putting that together that we just lost a month's salary.
Yes.
By listening to these yo-hos that have never run a business, most of them, that are lying to us about what the inflation rates are, letting them handle our money. And we're continuing to let them do it. And like, we should know this. We should know it. And I think what's going to happen is everything happens slowly and then all at once.
Yeah.
I think what's going to happen, and I don't know when it's going to happen, we're going to have massive currency failures around the world. You're already seeing it in Turkey, Argentina, Venezuela, Ecuador's having problems. Sri Lanka failed. We're seeing massive inflation. When you start to see massive inflation, and I went to Turkey a few months ago just so I could see what those poor people are going through with hyperinflation. You think we got it bad? They're at 73% inflation, official rate.
Oh my God.
And so our tour guide was spending let's call it $400 a month. It was in Turkish lira, but it was $400 a month. And her landlord called her and said, listen, I know you still have 6 months left on your lease, but I got to raise your rent. You know how much she wanted to raise the rent to? $1,500 a month. So these poor people cannot make ends meet. Now, if you got the dollar, since we're still the last strong currency around, right? In the land of the blind, the one-eyed man is king, right? If you got the dollar, you can go to Turkey and you can live like a king. Yeah. And you can buy lots of stuff. But those poor people in that economy can't. And we're going to be experiencing the same thing. All right, let me wrap it up by saying we're going to be experiencing massive currency failures away from the dollar. And then because we're so irresponsible, we're going to ruin the dollar too. And I don't know when it's going to happen. But when that happens, the world moves to Bitcoin, I believe. Gold and Bitcoin. I'm not saying it's either or. I'm saying there's room for all of it.
Yeah. And I will add one other thing. The best investment of any investment I've ever made, and they've done stats on if you bought a cherry tree and you bought apple stock, right? A fruit tree, a berry bush, a garden is the most proven, radically beneficial investment that I imagine that I could ever make. That's why I bought hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of fruit trees and got them all over the place.
Sure. Yeah.
I think that's possible, and I hope this is not true. I think that's possible that a handful of seeds will be worth more than a handful of gold in the next few years. It's possible. And under what circumstance would that be true? Well, when we're experiencing what the UN said is coming for certain, and that's a famine of biblical proportion. Right? Sure. Yeah. So now this is where it gets so interesting. I'm so thankful for our engagement on this. You mentioned the inflation rate. In the United States alone, between 54 and 70% of people are living paycheck to paycheck. So what does that mean when your gas goes up by $200 a month to go to work and back, and your food price goes up by $200 a month or $400, and then your energy to heat your home in the winter goes up by $100 a month? That's it. You can't, if you're already living paycheck to paycheck, your credit cards are already maxed, and we have the highest credit card debt right now, I believe, of any time in history, then there's no more room. There's an end to that game. And it seems like we are at the end of that cycle.
It seems like it, but you'd be surprised at how long these cycles can go. Yeah. You'd be along. And I want to go back to your point about the worldwide famine. Yeah. And all you have to do is study what Bill Gates is doing and what China is doing, right? They're buying agricultural land around the world. Why? I don't know why. but I have a feeling it has something to do with what you're talking about, how seeds and fruits and vegetables and the ability to produce them can be worth a lot more than TVs and cars and other stuff like that we think we need.
Yeah.
I think Bill is also the owner of the largest seed bank in the world as well.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which tells you
I didn't
something
know that. Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
And he invested huge in baby formula.
Yep.
Well before the baby, and he invested, and he said on stage his jab investments have netted him a 20-to-1 return on investment.
He's done all right. Just need to follow what Bill Gates is doing, what you're doing. So.
Yeah, you want to get an insider ear on things, follow that son of a gun.
Right.
Oh my gosh. So then the solution to it, like with what you teach, is you teach recognizing patterns and taking the emotions out and using logic and following those patterns in a way that helps you have a yield, a return on your investment.
Yeah, I mean, and that's using the conventional fiat currency method in the stock market for sure. But it works, right? And I can ignore the weeds in the garden, right? But they're there, right? Yeah. I need to pull them and I need to play in the garden, right? I can't go pick up my chips and go somewhere else. I've got to play in this garden. So, the Bitcoin has been no picnic either for the last 6 or 7 months, unless you have this view that goes out like mine does. Like I've been buying Bitcoin. I started getting involved in it about 1.5 years ago. Upset that I missed the initial run. I mean, I'm still upset. I could have bought 1,000 Bitcoin for $100, but I didn't. But going back to this garden analogy, when's the best time to plant a tree? 20 years ago. Second best time? Today. So I'm stacking Bitcoins. Why? Because I don't know if it's going to happen today or tomorrow. I can tell you that there's never been a 4-year period where anybody who's ever bought Bitcoin has lost money. And so it's hard to ignore what I think is really the closest thing to perfect money that human beings have ever devised. Right. And that's Bitcoin, not the other cryptocurrencies. They all have some interesting uses, but they don't have that thing about scarcity. And I'm a big supply and demand and economy guy. Yeah. And, when supply is constrained and demand goes up, you get price increases. Well, there's only 21 million Bitcoin that are ever going to be made. And the last Bitcoin will be mined in 2140. And so before that, we have now 19 million have already been mined, by the way. So we're not inflating that very much anymore.
Right.
So when 21 million Bitcoin are distributed among the population of the earth of 8 billion, and everybody starts to go toward that, it'll be too late when you and I recognize it. So my belief is you take $10 and you put it in Bitcoin now, because your $10, if you let it sit in the bank, is only going to be worth $9 next year in buying power. So you might as well buy a Bitcoin. Okay, it might not be the best hedge for inflation this year or next year, but I believe in 5 to 10 years, every Bitcoin you own is worth $1 million. I firmly believe that. Yeah. And I don't put out all my eggs in that basket either. Yeah. I have some Bitcoin. But I believe Bitcoin. Well, we don't want to do that. But
that would go against all your principles.
Yeah. And I mean, I invest in the stock market. I have some real estate and I invest in my businesses. There's a portfolio allocation that I do for myself and that everybody should do for themselves. What's the right one for you? I don't know, but I believe everybody should have 1% Bitcoin, something. Some exposure.
Bitcoin, gold, silver, and food.
Yeah. I need to add food into my allocation. I'm building a farm here, but I like the fact that you actually say that's a part of your allocation.
Oh, the most valuable, and I'll share with you. You buy a fruit tree in a 10-gallon pot from the local nursery store for $80 or $100.
Yeah.
Now you grow that fruit tree out. You put good soil around it. And if it's a drought, you make sure it gets water at the root ball. And sometimes you don't even need to do that if it rains regularly. But within 12 months, with very little to no maintenance, that fruit tree has more than doubled in value just before it even provides fruit, because the size, it grows, right? Yeah. And then pretty soon that fruit tree is providing fruit. Now, if you want to get really ROI extreme, you plant a seed, right? A seed that you could get out of a piece of fruit that you buy at the grocery store. You go plant that seed, and within a certain amount of times, that seed, and you could get 20 out of the same fruit, or 50. Now you've got 50 times $100. And, there's a little maintenance involved in that, but the return on investment of nature, it's infinite.
Yeah. Yeah.
Really,
I need to take lessons from you on growing seeds, because I started my gardening career about a month and a half ago.
Yeah.
And I think I'm like the number one seed killer right now. I planted over 200 or 300 seeds, and I think I got like 10 that are coming up now. But anyway, I'm figuring it out. I'm learning,
I love it.
You have some principles you apply to your stock trading and wealth architect growing print, so take some of those lessons and apply them here, and I am confident you will succeed.
Oh, yeah.
I think you're right.
One thing you brought up, and sorry, I'm going to go backwards a little bit, is some of the messaging coming from Wall Street and how they're telling a story that people believe and act upon. And it brought up to me a book that I've recently been consuming, and it's called Weapons of Mass Instruction. It's by a man named John Taylor Gatto. And it is really about the hijacking of our education system.
Oh, man.
Which started, really two of the major people involved in that are the foundations you hear about often if you're venturing down the rabbit holes that the three of us have gone down before. It is the Rockefeller Foundation, the Carnegie Foundation. And what they did was they essentially overtook education and intentionally started dumbing us down, right? One of the things that John brings up in that book, which really was profound, and a simple measurement, was reading comprehension. And they analyzed military people who were applying to join the service, and they saw staggering decline in the amount of young men and women who were trying to get into the service and their level of reading comprehension in a very short period of time. It was dropping by massive basis points every 10 years because of how effective they were at hijacking the education system. So relating it to what you talked about there, we have become very good at, quote unquote, trusting the experts.
Yep.
Right? We have lost the ability to logically take in information, sit with it, seek other sources of information, right? Because just because we have the Wall Street Journal telling us one thing, doesn't mean that's the only piece of information available for people who want to be in the stock market. So what I'm getting at here is, how can we realize that expanding our brain and looking for multiple pieces of information in and around the same or similar topic is the right thing to do before we make our educated decisions on doing things, right? Yeah. Today, we are in this fucking mess where we're about to have a dollar collapse, a food system collapse, a medical system collapse. Name your system. They're close to collapsing. We're here not because we don't have incredible technologies and access to information, right? Anything you want to learn about today is available at your fingertips. But we've become so entrenched in the trust the experts mentality and do what you're told, right? Fall in line with your classmates, right? Don't work as a group, etc. And it's got us in this place. So what I want to ask you, Mark, is what do you think today would really be some, we'll call it sage advice for our audience based on your experience about how they can start gathering better knowledge to apply to their life to get them out of some of these predicaments we're all currently experiencing?
I love the question, and I want to talk about a couple of the concepts that you brought up there. So I haven't read that book, but I've been talking about this for a long time. We don't teach what we need to know in life in our schools. We teach a bunch of bullshit. I know more about Romeo and Juliet than I know about paying my taxes. Romeo and Juliet doesn't help me on tax day, right? Either does the Pythagorean theorem, right? But I know the shit out of that. I just don't know how to have relationships, right? I don't know how to go buy a house. If I wanted to go buy a house, I have to go take a seminar or take a course. I don't know how to invest in the stock market. If I want to learn how to invest in the stock market, I didn't learn that in school. I didn't learn budgeting. I didn't learn tax. I didn't learn any of that stuff in school. Why? Maybe it was maybe it was intentional. But I can tell you that they don't want you to teach that stuff in school. So the things that are required courses in school are bullshit. They should be electives. And the things that are electives, the things we have to learn outside of school, should be required. And going back to when we started this in the industrial age, we certainly needed people to go to the factory. So we had to program them to go through school. And I don't know if it started out as a malicious thing or not. I haven't read the book. I'm interested in that though. But, people I don't think start out, colluding. Maybe they do. But in this case, I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt. They started out by saying, our education is all over the place. We need to have some kind of system because we got all these cars that need to be made, and we got all these bridges that need to be built, and these railroads that need to be laid down, and we have to build the society. How do we do it? We got to give them a standardized education. All right. So that's where I think it goes. But I think it's gone off the rails, right? And I think it's gone that dumbing down of people is certainly happening, and we're getting stupider and stupider, and especially the people that unfortunately were kept out of school for a year. Like, what's happening to that year? Like, either it's going to be the same, everything's going to be the same, in which case we don't even need that year of school, or there's going to be people that are 1 year stupider when they get out in the real world, right? How are they going to make up for that knowledge?
Or 1 year smarter because they took some of their education in their own hands and started learning as much as they can from alternative sources.
Maybe. I just don't know a lot of 16-year-olds that didn't use that time to play video games.
Good point. See, now with this freaking click.
The ones I know were playing video games. But anyway, maybe the smart ones were getting ahead. I know one smart one that she's got a $250,000 business now that she started during COVID, and she was 18. Anyway.
Awesome.
So I think the pendulum swings too far both ways. And I think, we're in the middle of that right now. If you put up, I like Tesla stock, you're going to get a bunch of trolls on the internet that tell you how much of an idiot you are for liking Tesla. You can't even have a debate anymore. You're just an idiot, and they block you, or you get some censorship. So that separation is separating us as humans, right? We're also separated because in a lot of ways we're more together. Like, we wouldn't be able to have this kind of a conversation without Zoom, but we're in 3 different geographic locations and we are able to have it. So that's a benefit. But that separation of ideology is creating a schism in our society. And it's creating this polarization where you're digging into your positions and you're not allowing free thought. You're not allowing debate. I think that's engineered. I think that's engineered. In the healthiest people, I don't remember who said it. Somebody said this, I think it was Einstein. Everybody always gives Einstein the credit on something that's really brilliant. So I'm going to go ahead and do the same thing. So I think it said the definition of an evolved mind is the ability to hold 2 opposing thoughts in it at the same time. I don't know who said it, but it sounds pretty cool. Let's say I said it. Maybe I can get the credit with this one.
There you go.
Nobody's remembered it.
I heard you.
I said it, so I get the credit. So
and I'm holding 2 opposing thoughts. I'm holding that Mark did it and Einstein did it. So
so you are way advanced. And I think it's this trust the experts thing that we go, well, you're over here and I'm over here. Who do we trust? Let's trust this expert. Now let's get to the green movement. Okay. Now I'm a green guy. I'm actually trying to live pretty organic here and everything like that. But I need hydrocarbons. Like, we couldn't do this call without a hydrocarbon running my lights. I don't care how much solar I have. There's a time where the sun doesn't shine. I need some hydrocarbons. We need diesel to pull the electric car battery out of the earth, right? The lithium. We need it. It's a definition of technology advancement is how you use energy. We've gotten really efficient at using it. I don't want to go back to the dark ages where I'm burning wood in my stove, like they're going to have to do in Germany this year. So it's that separation. And now the green movement, if you have the belief that it's global warming or climate change that's causing all these problems, and you put out a paper that says that, you get funded. If you have an opposing view, you don't get funded. So whose opinions do we hear? The ones that put out the paper that says that it's global warming, that says that cow farts are creating all these problems that we have in our society.
Yeah.
And this is where I got to interject one fact that anybody can look up and verify with their own experience. Joel Salatin, he has proven to the world and done several TED Talks, or at least 2, where he is raising cows in a way that's natural. He grazes his lawn with these cattle, and then behind the cattle, he has chickens, and at sometimes of the year, he has pigs. And he is creating way, way, way more profit per acre. He's employing more people. Yeah. He's building soil while he's creating profit. And he is, even though he doesn't believe in this false narrative, he using the cows as the mowers of the grass, which the grass become a carbon sink. He's actually decreasing carbon footprint. Amazing. And if we just look to nature, right? And I think you and I talked about this, Jim, a few weeks ago. And that is, if you've got some larva of an aphid that's eating your tomato, well, there's probably some animal that can live off the larva, some wasp that's going to come and attack. And so you just got to look outside. Nature's been around for billions of years. And, we think we could solve all the problems. We think we can engineer them. We trust the scientists to figure all this stuff out. You think that we're smart, we're better. We're going to make a dent in this climate change thing. What happened? How did the Dust Bowl happen in the 1930s? Like, there weren't cars and things that were making the earth warm and creating droughts. But nobody says, well, the 1930s was caused by hydrocarbons and carbon. We have a cycle by deforestation and the destruction of the planet and ridiculous agriculture. According to Bill Mollison, who's one of my heroes, the agriculture taught in colleges and universities in the last 100 years is the most destructive teaching in the history of the world, and that is demonstrable. Every monoculture out there is a death zone. It's a biological desert. And then you've got Billy G and all these crazy psychopaths that all happen to work for BlackRock to some degree or with, which BlackRock, I think that's an interesting name. How do you name your company? I would not pick, like, mine is Food Forest Abundance, right? Because that's our intention. I believe BlackRock is their intention, right? It's crazy, isn't it? And the simplest thing is when we take out somebody asked me the other day, Jim, when will you know when we've won the war? And I'll say, that's easy. When they're no longer spraying aluminum oxide and poisons in our air, when they're no longer putting fluoride, which is a toxic chemical, in our water, when they're no longer putting glyphosate in our living soil, the soil being the immune system of the earth, and they're killing all the microbiome in the soil by just nuking it, right? It's insane. Absolutely.
I want to bring up something that when you actually consider it is incredibly telling. If you think about where some of the major and most expensive developments are happening today, it is in places like Miami, right? Miami has some of the most massive condo booms the world has ever saw. Yeah. And where are these condos going up? Well, they're oceanside. right by the water. Right by the water. So if the oceans rising was the serious threat that we're being told, you would see in every single condo development prospectus, right? Their investment prospectus, that your investment is at serious risk of not happening because the ocean level is rising and our bank will not fund it. Except you don't see that in every condo development. The banks aren't saying that. The banks would not be investing their dollars and funding these developments if they knew their developments were going to go bye-bye, right? So I believe that we are doing some damage to our environment without question. Humans have been negligent in caring for the earth. However, do I believe we have this climate change narrative that now we all need to have electric vehicles that have on and off switches so we can be told, Matthew, you've gone too far from your house today, or Matthew, your carbon footprint is too big, so you can't buy this steak you were about to buy. And oh yeah, Matthew, since you don't have enough money to travel, how about you sell some of your carbon credits to Mr. Wealthy Guy over here so he can take his private plane and travel so you can't, right? I don't believe that shit. That's all about
keep
control.
going. Keep going. Matthew, we don't like what you posted on Facebook.
Yeah.
Oh,
We don't like your freedom belief there on that.
Yeah. Yeah. Your social credit has gone down. Ding, ding.
Yeah. No groceries for you.
This is mind-bogglingly happening right now all around the world. Some friends that are very, very wealthy, I mean, very, very nine-figure wealthy, and they're funding all these freedom movements around the world. They had their insurance canceled. They called up and said, what the heck is going on? Why did you cancel our insurance? Because your social credit score was not high enough.
It dropped, yeah.
Wow.
To me, that is, and this is it's starting to filter in. And of course, they're saying, and this is where the psychopaths have got in the minds of certain segments of society. The people that are controlled by fear. Fear is the ultimate control mechanism, right? They're controlled by the narrative that humans are bad, that humans are a plague, a cancer on the earth, and we have to depopulate. I've talked to otherwise good people, who I thought were good people, and they said, Jim, we have to reduce the world's population. That is the foundational scam of our world today. When we simply use our resources in a regenerative way, there's no limit. We could have 20 billion people here if we simply grew our food in our backyards and took out the poisons. It would immediately change the whole narrative. And that's why I'm so passionate about it.
Yeah. No, I can drive 20 minutes either side of my house and not see a human being. Yeah. And there's plenty of room in this world. We don't need to worry about getting rid of the population. We just need to do it, like you say, in a better, more responsible fashion. And that's not driving electric vehicles and going everything to solar and getting rid of nuclear power. There's room for all of it. It's an abundant world. You have it in the name of your company. It's an abundant world. And I want to get back to the answer to your question. I don't have a silver bullet, Matthew, about what people can do. But by listening and reading between the lines of what we're talking about, there's a lot of action that you can take. You can grow your own food. You can invest in the most perfect money that there is, right? And I can get into why it's perfect money, but Bitcoin. You can start creating your own cash flow within this westernized fiat currency-based system through programs like mine, real estate, other things like that. And you can really start getting the knowledge of what you need to be a critical thinker. All of that leads to a freedom mindset. And the freedom mindset is what we're all about, right? Like, if you ask people, is it better to be free or not free? I'll bet about 999 out of 1,000 will say it's better to be free. Well, why aren't we encouraging that more? Because that one guy out of 1,000 is controlling the narrative.
Yeah, you nailed it. And JP Morgan and his crew, he commissioned a report 100 years ago, and they looked at the most influential newspapers in the United States, and they bought almost all of them for that exact reason that you just pointed to. Now, I would like to get into Bitcoin, and I have an idea that I'd like to share with you and get your thoughts on. As an investor, as a lover of Bitcoin, I love the decentralized narrative, right? Isn't it the exchanges are not necessarily decentralized, and
right.
That's where the problems have been. Is that right?
That's correct.
Okay. So what if there were a currency, a money, a way to barter and exchange, a digital way that was actually born in abundance? So like Bitcoin, the US dollar is a complete debt instrument. It's a fiat currency that's not backed by anything, and it's created out of debt through the Federal Reserve, which is a privately held entity that we, the people, are not allowed to audit, right? Is that all true?
That's 100% true.
Nuts to me. So those instruments are part of the enslavement of humanity. What if we attach a digital asset to food production in a caloric way that was very logical, where the people involved became the stewards of our currency, as opposed to the gamblers and gamers of our society? The producers would actually be responsible ethically for the distribution of the wealth of our society. And what if this was run by a DAO, like a decentralized autonomous organization? Then what would you be interested in? And I'll share some more details with you, but maybe offline. But would you be interested in being part of something where we took a currency and attached it to the most logical thing that it could ever be attached to, And that is the creation of abundance at the local level, being the actual food that we need.
Yeah, I think it's a cool idea. Like the other 19,000 cryptocurrencies, they all have some really cool uses. The question is executing the details. How do you make sure that eventually it doesn't get corrupted? And I like your idea of having a DAO being responsible for it, because then maybe it's a little bit more decentralized. So that, to me, that's the caveat, is if you can make it so for the listeners out there, and you guys probably know this, and maybe your listeners know this, but Bitcoin was created in 2009 by a guy or a group or something named Satoshi Nakamoto. And the most beautiful part of this story is that in 2011, after he created this gift, I call it the gift to the world, he disappeared, or this group disappeared. So nothing could ever be changed really with it, except for a group of 51%, of all the nodes. And there's tens and tens of thousands and thousands of nodes that would all have to agree on it. And one of the most foundational principles of Bitcoin is that the 21 million Bitcoins that are going to be created is immutable. You cannot change it. And so that's survived a 13-year test of time, where the other 19,000 coins have not. So you have to be able to figure out a way to not have that temptation there by anyone or anything or any voting mechanism or any hack like Bitcoin has had to be able to survive. And now you've got a proven 13-year technology that I think is the future. And we can talk about, there's room for other ones. I think there's room for Ethereum, although we're on like the 10th fork of Ethereum. And that's changed so many times, but it's still, it's got such utility. It's a great backbone for smart contracts that other people are going to continue to build on it. That might hang. It's like Coca-Cola and Pepsi, but maybe RC Cola is in there too. But like, I don't know about the seventh best cola. I couldn't name it. Right.
Yeah, me neither.
So there's going to be room. It's a beautiful technology. Cryptocurrency, blockchain technology is beautiful. And I love the way you're tying it in with one of our most important resources, and that's food. So there's probably something there.
Right.
There's probably something there. I'd be interested in at least batting an idea around with you. But let's go to Bitcoin if we could. Can we?
Yeah, please.
You said you want to talk about it a little more.
Yeah.
So in order to understand why Bitcoin is so cool, you've got to understand what money is. And if you have an opinion, by the way, on cryptocurrency and Bitcoin, and you haven't done at least, 50 to 100 hours of studying it, you really don't have a valid opinion. Like, you've got to understand it because it's a new technology. It's like imagine, in 1980 trying to describe online, buying Amazon, right? Trying to imagine in 1970, having a call like this on your phone. Like it wasn't even it was a Star Trek thing, right? And so you have to realize that there's a lot of things about the technology that are still coming of age, and people are still having trouble answering it. I want to get back to Matthew's point about decentralization and exchanges. And so let's talk about money. So money, and let's compare dollar and gold, right? We all understand the dollar because we can carry it around, whether it's a Canadian dollar, a US dollar, euro dollar. Well, that doesn't really exist, but the dollar, right? And then we can also understand gold. Now, I'll bet you that you guys don't have any gold in your pocket, right? But you all know that there's supposedly some kind of value to it, right? That's because over the last 5,000 years, gold has always been a store of value. It could never be replaced. There was always a scarcity component. There's a certain amount of gold plus a little bit that can be mined out of the ground every year, but it costs money to mine it. And so that kind of, the more it's worth, the more it can be mined. If gold goes to $100,000 an ounce instead of under $2,000 an ounce, you can believe that there are going to be a lot more people looking for it and finding it and mining it, right? Because it's going to be worth it. So there is not a real scarcity component to it, although it's more scarce than any other thing that we can think of. So it's got to be scarce. 500 years ago, we used to use, I wasn't around, but we used to use seashells, right? Or then in the Roman Empire, we used to use coins, and people would start shaving off the real silver from the coins because they would debase their currency in that way. So if you study money, you realize it's got to have a scarcity component. But if you want to take your net worth with you to go to Europe because you're afraid of what's going on in your country, it's hard to move gold, right? If you got $1 million worth of gold, it's just hard to move it. I don't work out enough to be able to move that amount of gold. So you've got to have a different way of moving it. Now, what we normally do is, I'll just wire the money. Well, you can't wire the money on Friday. night, Saturday or Sunday on a holiday, right? You've got to go through the traditional banking system. But I can tell you, I went to El Salvador to experience what those people on Bitcoin Beach are experiencing and how cool it was. And I was able to take my phone and faster than a credit card buy dinner using Bitcoin from my Bitcoin wallet. And these third world people really understand Bitcoin. They held up their wallet with a QR code. It took a picture. I took a picture. Boom. In 2 seconds, I had transferred $2.75 in Bitcoin. And it happened at lightning speed. So that's the second rail that rides on top of it.
And there was no one in between that transaction.
And there was nobody in between. And I could do it on a Saturday. And it didn't have to settle. So if you want to move your Bitcoin, like the people in Afghanistan, before we pulled out of Afghanistan, the people in the know, the wealthy people in Afghanistan, put their money in Bitcoin. The other people didn't, and they closed the banks. I don't think they've reopened them. And there's massive starvation going on. And so Bitcoin saves people. 70% of this world is still unbanked. Imagine the worker in Nigeria that doesn't have access to a bank. Like we have banks everywhere around, right? We can go find a bank. Can't swing a dead cat without hitting a bank, right? But in Nigeria, they don't have them. You have to go hours to get a bank, right? The world is like that. We don't see it. But this is a technology that's enabling the world to be able to do a transaction. And you can move massive amounts without a middleman, like Matthew said. And so that's another component of money.
And tax consequences. Were there any tax consequences in the trade that you just talked about?
Well, no, because it's property, right? It's like there's no tax consequences really if I do the at that moment, there's no tax consequences, right? Yeah. Maybe the person in El Salvador has to pay income tax, but that's a fiat currency construct.
Exactly.
That's not a construct.
So that's another massive benefit of this direct peer-to-peer trade without the US dollar, the fiat Federal Reserve, right?
Yeah, and I'm not going to espouse the fact that we have these governments that in theory are supposed to be doing us services and they need to pay for those services with taxes and saying that Bitcoin is around it, is a way around it. It is, but that's not my angle. My angle is it's got such great utility. And just the you can carry it with you. You can memorize 24 words, and nobody can ever take it away from you unless they bonk you over the head. And that's how you move your Bitcoin. Is you have a passphrase, 24-word passphrase, and you don't have to carry it in your pockets and have it subject to confiscation when you're going across a border. So you can move it any time of the day or night. You can't change the scarcity of it. It's accepted because it doesn't change in one Bitcoin is still worth the Bitcoin that it was worth 5 years ago.
Yeah,
you can say what you want about it's worth against the dollar, but it's still worth the Bitcoin. And if people start to adopt it, it's taken off.
Right. And I will declare that it is an issue for me because I believe that we are at war with the governmente. Govern is manage and control, and mente is mind. I believe that they are trying to harm us. So I think that any way around, this is my personal opinion, around funding our slave masters is a good thing.
Well, if you utilize it in that way, that's up to you. And I'm just saying it's good insurance against something really, really massively bad happening. And this world is different from where it was 5 years ago. It was a little more innocent 5 years ago. Now there's all kinds of stuff. You're seeing confiscations of money because of political support that people are giving to truckers and farmers. Right, you're seeing them blocked away from their money because they donated to the truckers and farmers. You're seeing governments making decisions for you. If you don't get this medical thing, you can't go to your job. You can't go to the store. You can't go on a trip. That's some change that we've not seen any time in our lifetimes.
It's force and violence, and it keeps changing forms, and it's to the max today so much.
Yeah, well, it's a scenario of them using fear as the weapon, right?
Yes.
Everything that is being done today is really about driving that fear narrative, and people inherently give up their rights to feel safe, which is why fear is such a powerful motivator. And you tie it into the dumbing down of society, leveraging our education system, combine those two things. And to me, it's no wonder we're in this place.
Thomas Jefferson said, when you give up your freedom for safety, you'll end up with neither.
Yep.
And he was right. Maybe it was Albert Einstein that said it, but anyway.
Or Benjamin Franklin, maybe.
Yeah.
Benjamin Franklin.
Yes.
Well, either way, we're headed down that path where people are giving up their freedom for safety, and we are very quickly headed to a point where we have neither.
Amazing, Mark. Man, thank you so much. I really do. I'm excited to share with you, offline here, what we've got coming to market. And it's called Yield and Sprouts. It's an NFT and a digital asset that is mined. It's actually farmed. It's actually a yield. It's based in growing food ethically based on the caloric value. And it is actually born in abundance. Instead of it being a liability in its production process, it's actually an asset from its inception. And then it incentivizes growing food, and it incentivizes community, and it connecting the growers with the community, right? It creates a trade mechanism between the growers and the community members that is completely decentralized. So I'm really excited to chat with you about it offline.
Yeah, I like it. And if it's going to be based on caloric value, I'm going to be growing sugar.
Yeah. Yes, permaculture style, but sugar is a pretty good one. So are sweet potatoes.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Hey, Mark, why don't you tell our listeners where they can find you and any great resources you'd like to share? We'd love to be able to have our audience collaborate with you wherever possible.
Oh, well, thanks. I'm all over the place. MarkYegge.com, Mark Yegge, Yegge. I have a site called Destiny Creation. That's where kind of I rail against the educational system that we alluded to. And I'll set up a little link on there. It'll have when you guys publish this, I'll put it on my website too. But it'll be destinycreation.com. Sorry, let's put the word go in front of it. go.destinycreation.com/Jim Gale. How about that? The name of your show, right? So it's go.destinycreation.com/Jim Gale, Gale. And we'll put that out there. And I'll have a link to a book, or just a book that I wrote called Regular Paychecks, which is how you can create regular paychecks out of the stock market. I alluded to it at the top part of the podcast. To create that reliable income in this crazy stock market that we have, and be able to hopefully sleep at night. But yeah, and you can find me on Twitter and all over the place that way. But it's been a real pleasure talking with you guys. I love to hear. We don't agree 100% on everything, but that's okay. I love to. Yeah, it'd be boring, right? I love batting around the ideas with you guys, and I love how open you are to some of these ideas and where the future is going to go. So it was really a lot of fun. Thanks.
Thank you, buddy. Very much.
Yeah, it's great that we get to have differing ideas that really does form a foundation for great debate. And it's a problem today that there is too much of the same, right? So thank you so much for saying that. And thank you for being a guest today on the Jim Gale Show. It's been a real pleasure to speak with you and get some insight into your brain and kind of where you're thinking about wealth creation these days. And I love the fact that you love to be a mentor. I think really for everybody out there, this is a time to search for people like that, because none of us get to be our best by ourselves. We do have to take responsibility over our own lives, and working with people who have done things we want to do is probably the most wise thing you can do today to help you navigate turbulent times. There are people who have gone through worse things than we're going through now, and they've made it out the other side in much better shape. Because of it, they become stronger, more resilient, wiser, more financially free, etc. So right now, as we go through some of these challenges, it is probably one of the best times you could ever have to go find someone to mentor you, someone who can take you by the hand and show you what they've done to navigate some of their challenges in life. So for you, Mark, thank you for being a mentor to others. Thank you for sharing your wisdom today with all of our audience, and we really appreciate you coming on the show.
My pleasure, guys. Thanks a lot.
Thank you for tuning into the show. You can check out more episodes on YouTube, Apple, Spotify, and your favorite podcast apps. Check out our show notes for any websites linked to this episode, including where to connect with us on social media.
We appreciate you dropping by today. Remember to like, subscribe, and turn on your notifications so you'll be updated with each episode.
And visit us at thejimgaleshow.com to check out all of our exclusive content. We appreciate you dropping by.